Sarah never imagined that an ordinary Saturday would turn her world upside down. But that's exactly what happened when her son walked into the kitchen that morning. There he stood, hair tousled from sleep, clutching a box of cereal like some kind of offering. His voice came out gentle but determined as he said something that made her heart skip a beat. "Mom, what if we all went together this year? Back to the lake house, the three of us. Like we used to when I was younger." The coffee mug nearly slipped from her fingers. She stared at her son, taking in the vulnerability in his expression, that quiet hopefulness that made him seem both younger and older than his 16 years. Lately, he'd been carrying a heaviness she recognized all too well, the weight of understanding more than any teenager should have to. Sarah steadied her voice. "Honey, your father's schedule is pretty packed. He's got work commitments, and you could at least ask him," he said softly. "Please. I miss the way things were, even if it's only for a couple of days." Those words landed harder than she expected. She'd convinced herself they'd protected him from the pain of their separation, shielded him from the fractures in their marriage. But standing there, watching his hopeful face, she understood how deeply he'd felt every crack, every silence, every absence. He just hadn't said anything until now. He'd always been the type to hold everything inside, letting his feelings surface only when they absolutely needed to. Perhaps this was that moment. Sarah exhaled slowly. She couldn't bear to let him down. Over the past months, he'd been withdrawing, laughing less, speaking in shorter sentences, spending more time alone. If this could bring back even a flicker of his old joy, didn't she owe it to him to try? Even if it meant reopening doors she thought she'd locked forever. She reached for her phone, pulse quickening with a complicated mix of anxiety and memory. Her fingers moved across the screen. "Our son wants us to spend the weekend at the lake house together. Would you consider it?" She hesitated before sending it, but ultimately pressed the button. His response came surprisingly fast. "If it's important to him, count me in." Those simple words made her chest constrict. No hesitation, no resentment, no coldness. It felt like Michael had been waiting for exactly this kind of invitation, for something that would bring them all together again. That realization made breathing suddenly difficult. Sarah turned around. Her son was pretending to focus on something else, but his eyes betrayed his attention. She nodded. He said yes. His entire face transformed with a brightness she hadn't seen in months. "Seriously? That's amazing." Watching him light up filled her with warmth. But beneath that warmth ran an undercurrent of uncertainty, because now it was happening. Now she'd have to spend an entire weekend with the man she once imagined growing old beside. The man she'd loved with an intensity that still caught her off guard in unexpected moments. The man she'd walked away from because sometimes love alone couldn't bridge the distance between two people. She tried to push away the flood of memories that followed. Michael's laugh when she'd tease him about something small. The warmth of his hand finding hers on cold mornings. The comfort of their shared rhythms and routines. His voice saying her name in that tired but still wanting to connect way he had at the end of long days. The way he'd always kissed the top of her head in passing. Old patterns. Old tenderness. Old wounds. She reminded herself that what was done was done. People evolved, circumstances changed, and their marriage had ended for legitimate reasons. No dramatic betrayals. Just the accumulation of small things, miscommunication, demanding schedules, unspoken needs piling up until the space between them felt impossible to cross. But her son's happiness pushed those doubts aside, at least temporarily. "All right," she said quietly. "Next weekend, then." "Just like before," he said, stepping forward to hug her, a quick, grateful embrace. She held on a little longer than necessary, needing that anchor, that reminder that this was for him. not for the memories tugging at the edges of her heart. After he left the kitchen, Sarah opened the curtains and gazed outside. The sky stretched out in perfect blue, the kind of gentle morning that felt almost cruel given the storm brewing inside her. She pictured the lake house, the scent of pine needles, the sound of water lapping against the shore, the porch where she and Michael once sat wrapped in blankets watching sunsets fade into darkness. She imagined crossing that threshold again and feeling everything she thought she'd buried rising back to the surface. She breathed out slowly. This trip wasn't about revisiting old feelings. It was about giving her son something he missed, something he deserved. But deep in her heart, a quiet voice whispered anyway, tentative and uncertain and almost frightened. What if being together again didn't hurt the way she expected? What if it felt right? She tried to dismiss the thought, but it lingered there, patient and persistent. The weekend was approaching, and nothing about it felt simple. The day arrived faster than Sarah anticipated. It seemed like only moments passed between agreeing to go and watching Michael's truck pull into her driveway. Her son rushed out before she could even step outside, leaving her standing in the doorway, gathering her composure. She smoothed her hair, took a steady breath, and walked out with a calmness she didn't genuinely feel. Michael stood beside his truck, leaning casually against the door. When he noticed her, he straightened and offered a small smile, polite, soft, but warm enough to stir something inside her. He looked both familiar and changed in the way people do when life has humbled them and taught them lessons they never knew they needed. "Hey, Sarah," he said, voice low and even. "Hey," she replied, trying not to show the sudden nervousness rising in her stomach. The moment lingered briefly before their son called from the back seat. "Come on, Mom." "I made a playlist." Sarah climbed inside, and the three of them began the long drive toward the lake house. Morning sunlight poured through the windshield, bathing everything in soft gold. And for just a second, Sarah remembered all those other drives they'd once taken together. Long drives where their hands naturally intertwined. Drives where music filled the silence and laughter followed close behind. Now the silence felt different. Not cold, just weighted with things unsaid. Their son talked almost constantly, jokes, stories from school, random observations he'd been saving for exactly this kind of moment. His excitement filled the truck, and Sarah felt grateful for it. With him talking, she didn't have to worry about accidentally revealing the turmoil inside her. Still, every so often, she caught Michael glancing in the rearview mirror. Sometimes his eyes settled on their son, proud and tender. But other times, when he thought she wouldn't notice, his gaze flickered toward her, quick, almost shy, carrying something she didn't dare name. She turned toward the window to steady herself, watching the landscape transform as they left the city behind and entered long stretches of highway. Pine trees lined the road, and the air gradually shifted to that clean, crisp scent she'd always associated with trips north. 2 hours into the drive, they reached the small roadside diner they used to visit every summer. It looked unchanged, weathered sign, large windows, and a painted menu board that probably hadn't been updated in years. Their son jumped out eagerly, saying he remembered the place from old photographs. Sarah and Michael exited more slowly. "Feels like traveling back in time," Michael said, hands in his pockets. "It really does," she replied softly. For a moment, they stood side by side in silence, hearing only the distant hum of passing cars and their son's voice calling from inside. Sarah wasn't sure what she'd expected to feel returning to this place: sadness, tension, perhaps regret. But what washed over her instead was something gentler: nostalgia, a small reminder that not every fragment of their shared past carried pain. They went inside, greeted by the smell of fresh waffles and roasted coffee. The three of them settled into a corner booth. Their son ordered pancakes, as he always had. Michael ordered black coffee. Sarah realized she still knew his order before he spoke it. Their food arrived quickly, and while their son ate happily, Sarah noticed Michael glancing toward her repeatedly. Never for too long, never too obviously. Just enough to show he was thinking something he wasn't saying. Halfway through the meal, their son went to select a slice of pie for later. Leaving Sarah and Michael alone at the table, Michael cleared his throat. "You doing okay?" "Yeah," she said. "Just adjusting." He nodded slowly. "I'm glad we're doing this. For him, I mean." She met his eyes. Yes, for him. But something in the way their gazes held each other made her question whether that was the only reason. Before the silence grew heavy, their son returned with a grin, holding a plate with cherry pie. "They still make it the same way, Mom?" Sarah smiled, grateful he couldn't see her racing heart. They left the diner and continued driving. As the roads narrowed and the trees grew taller, the energy inside the truck shifted. Their son leaned his head against the window, drifting toward sleep. The playlist changed to softer songs, ones they used to listen to during late-night drives. Michael lowered the volume and whispered, "He looks peaceful." "He hasn't looked this peaceful in months," Sarah said. "I know," Michael replied, eyes still on the road. "I think he needed this." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "Maybe we all did." Sarah stared out the window again, her heart tightening. There was honesty in his tone. Not pressure, not expectation, just simple truth. As they neared the lake house, the water began appearing through the trees, shimmering in the afternoon light. The familiar sight hit Sarah like a gentle wave-warm, nostalgic, painful, comforting, all at once. She could almost hear their laughter from years past echoing through the woods. The truck slowed, and Michael parked in front of the small wooden structure that once held some of their happiest days. "Home for the weekend?" he said quietly. Sarah nodded, her heart trembling. She wasn't ready for what this place would bring back. She wasn't ready for the memories. She wasn't ready for Michael's gentle eyes, but as their son jumped out of the truck, excited and carefree, Sarah realized something important. Ready or not, the past was waiting for them the moment they opened that door. The lake house stood exactly as Sarah remembered it, quiet, wooden, touched by the gentle breeze coming off the water. As soon as the truck stopped, their son leaped out, shouting something about exploring the woods. His excitement filled the air, giving the place a warmth it hadn't held in years. Sarah stepped out slowly, letting the cool air wash over her. Pine trees surrounded the path, and the lake shimmered through the gaps like a secret waiting to be rediscovered. Michael carried their bags to the porch, moving with a steadiness that made everything feel grounded. When Sarah reached the door, she hesitated. The wooden handle felt the same under her palm, smooth from time and memory. She pushed it open, and the familiar scent of old books, pine wood, and summer evenings drifted out. It felt like stepping into another version of her life, one she never thought she'd face again. Michael set the bags down and looked around. "It hasn't changed," he said softly. "No, it really hasn't," Sarah replied. Inside, everything remained where they'd left it years ago. The faded rug, worn sofa, picture frames with nature photographs, the small dining table by the window. It felt frozen in time, untouched by the distance that had grown between them. Their son called from outside, asking permission to explore the lake trail. Michael shouted back, telling him to stay close. When their son's footsteps faded, a silence settled inside the lake house. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was full of memories neither knew how to acknowledge. Michael walked to the fireplace and brushed away some dust. "We used to sit here for hours," he said quietly. Sarah nodded. "We talked about everything back then." He looked at her. "Yeah, before life got too noisy." The word struck somewhere tender in her heart, but she didn't respond. Instead, she put their groceries away, trying to focus on simple tasks rather than complicated feelings. The rest of the afternoon passed in quick moments. Their son returning with stories about ducks at the lake, Michael fixing the old lantern, Sarah making sandwiches in the tiny kitchen. They moved around each other carefully, almost gracefully, like their bodies remembered how to share space, even if their hearts weren't certain. Later, as the sun began to set, Sarah stepped onto the porch to breathe in the quiet. The sky was turning soft gold, and the lake glowed beneath it. The sight tugged at her chest because she remembered sitting here with Michael nearly every evening back then. He would wrap a blanket around them both while they watched the light fade. Footsteps approached, and she didn't have to turn to know it was him. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Michael said as he joined her. "Yes," she whispered Dot. They stood side by side, not touching, just watching the sun melt behind the trees. The air felt heavier, like it carried every unspoken word between them. Sarah could feel Michael's presence, steady, familiar, too close and too far simultaneously. "I didn't expect this to feel so ... Michael began, but didn't finish. She looked at him. "So what?" He took a slow breath. "So right. Like we're supposed to be here." Sarah's heart stumbled. "Michael, we came for our son. That's all." "I know," he said gently. "But being here with you again, it reminds me of what we lost." "What I lost?" The honesty in his tone made her chest tighten with old pain and something almost hopeful. She hadn't expected him to say anything like that. She wasn't sure if she wanted to flee from the moment or preserve it. Before she could respond, their son's voice echoed from inside. "Mom, Dad, come see the view from the upstairs window." The moment broke apart, leaving their conversation unfinished. Hanging in the air like something delicate that needed more time, they went inside, following their son upstairs as he talked about setting up his camera to capture the morning sunrise. Watching his bright face reminded Sarah why they were here. This weekend was about giving him something whole again, something peaceful. But even as she reminded herself, she couldn't ignore the way Michael looked at her whenever their son wasn't watching, soft, thoughtful. Like he was remembering a version of her he'd missed more than he wanted to admit. That night, they made a simple dinner grilled cheese sandwiches, chips, and fruit. They ate together at the small table, and for a brief moment, it felt like a scene from a life that never left. Their laughter echoed under the wooden ceiling, light and easy. Sarah caught herself smiling more than she expected. After dinner, their son went outside to look at the stars, and Sarah leaned against the counter, cleaning up. Michael stayed beside her, trying dishes in quiet movements. "You know," he said gently, "you're still easy to be around." She looked down at the plate in her hands. "I don't know how to respond to that." "You don't have to," he said. "I just wanted you to know." The softness in his voice made her throat tighten. She felt too much and not enough at the same time. Too many memories, too many questions. Before anything else could be said, their son rushed back in, talking about a shooting star he thought he'd seen. Sarah felt grateful for the interruption. As she watched her son's excitement, she realized something simple but profound. Every minute at that lake house was pulling her closer to feelings she thought she'd buried, and yet part of her didn't want to run from them. Not anymore. By nightfall, the lake house felt wrapped in soft calm. Rain began to fall light at first, then steady, tapping against the wooden roof like a quiet rhythm from another time. Their son had gone to bed early, exhausted from hiking, exploring, and excitement. His peaceful breathing filled the upstairs hallway, a reminder of why this whole trip had happened. Downstairs, Sarah sat on the old couch near the fireplace. She'd lit a small fire, not because it was cold, but because the glow made the room feel safer, warmer, easier to breathe in. She wrapped a thin blanket around her shoulders and watched the flames move gently. Michael came in quietly, carrying 2 mugs of hot tea. He set one on the table in front of her and held his own as he sat in the chair nearby. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like a pause that both needed to fill, but neither wanted to rush. "I made your favorite," he said softly. "Still remember how you take it." Sarah picked up the mug. It smelled like chamomile and gentle memories. "You always made it better than I ever could." He smiled, but it was small and careful. Like he didn't want to push anything too far. The only sounds were the rain, the fire, and the faint creak of the old structure settling into the night. After a moment, Michael leaned back and stared into the flames. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. Sarah nodded without speaking. "I know we ended for real reasons," he said slowly, "but I still think about how things used to feel. And being here with you again, it makes me realize I didn't fight hard enough. I didn't communicate enough. I didn't listen enough." His honesty landed gently, not sharply. There was no blame in his voice, only truth. Sarah placed her mug on the table, her hand suddenly warm. "We both stopped trying," she said quietly. "It wasn't just you." I pulled away too. "Maybe we were exhausted," he said. "Maybe we were scared," she added. They shared a small, sad smile, the kind people give when they both know they lost something precious, but somehow found a bit of peace inside that loss. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled, rain slid along the windows, and the lake house held their silence like a friend who understood every emotion inside them. Then Michael looked at her. Really looked at her. "Sarah, being here with you today, hearing you laugh, watching you smile at our son, it reminded me why I fell in love with you. I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know." Her heart tightened with a rush of warmth and ache. She wasn't ready to address everything he felt, but she wasn't running from it either. She drew a slow breath. "I don't know what the future holds, Michael. I don't want to make promises just because nostalgia feels sweet. But I feel something too. Something I didn't expect." Michael nodded gently. "That's enough. I'm not asking for more." They didn't stand. They didn't lean closer. They didn't cross any lines. But something shifted quietly in the space between them, like a bridge had started to rebuild itself, plank by plank. Without either of them forcing it, Sarah leaned back into the couch and closed her eyes for a moment. The fire warmed her skin, but the warmth inside her chest came from something deeper, something she thought had disappeared years ago. Michael spoke again, softer this time. "You know, when our son asked for this trip, I thought it would be awkward. I thought we'd just do it for him and go back to our separate lives. But now, I think maybe he saw something we didn't." Sarah opened her eyes. "What do you mean?"